Hello, good evening, and welcome to the Functional Solution podcast and class. My name is Tal. I'm the educational director at the American Academy of Functional Health, and with us we have my wonderful co-host, Dr. Esha.
Hi, everyone. Hey, Dr. Tal.
Good to see you, Dr. Esha.
Good to see you as well. I'm excited about our topic tonight.
Yes, absolutely, and I hope that everybody's having a good day so far. I know the weather here is kind of shifting. It's we're slowly transitioning out of summer. I'm still in denial that we are, but it is what it is. So
well, I think we're getting your weather and you're getting our weather because now it's back hot here again, where it was like cooling off. So yeah.
The Northwest is I think we're getting your weather definitely in the Northwest. Yeah. So we're very excited about today's topic. And as you all already know, every week on Wednesday evening, we have a specific class where we discuss the root causes of chronic diseases and practical evidence-based strategies that you can already take and use in your practice. And we do this because we're very, very passionate. All of us in the Academy are very passionate about helping to transform patients' health, helping patients and providing information to providers that can help them to truly transform their patients, advance their patients' health and function, and utilizing all the tools that we have, the functional approach, the integrative medicine, the herbal, nutritional, lifestyle medicine, to do so. So if you're looking to really dive deeper into the root causes, get a better understanding of why your patients have persistent symptoms or conditions, you're in the right place. And I asked Dr. Esha to join me because she's got years of clinical experience and years of experience coaching and mentoring practitioners with these approaches. So thank you for joining us, Dr. Esha.
Yeah, totally. Thank you for having me, of course. It's always a really good time when we can kind of chat about the science and also help our practitioner audience out.
Yes, absolutely. And we are coming to you live. So if you have any questions, put them in the chat and we'll be happy to answer them. And today we have a really interesting topic. And this is the topic of longevity with functional medicine. So we call it longevity with functional medicine hype versus evidence because we know how much hype there's out there, from supplements to different gadgets to all sorts of stuff. And interestingly, there's a lot of evidence on longevity, and we're going to share with you some really cool studies, published studies, like peer-reviewed published studies today. But there's also stuff that out there that your patients are going to be buying and pursuing, and there's very little or no evidence to. And we're going to talk about those as well. So why we chose this topic? We typically, every week we go after and dive deeper into one specific condition or symptom or a certain struggle that your patients might have. But we picked the topic of longevity because it's such a big and emerging topic. According to the U.S. Census Bureau report published in 2020, there's an increase of a number of adults. Now, when I say older adults, I mean 65 and over. From obviously, if you go back to 1920, that was about 5 million in the US, right? And that was about 5% or 4.7% of the population. And the US Census Bureau reported in 2020 that those numbers increased to about 56 million older adults, which is about 17% of the US population. And by 2050, it projected to hit 82 million Americans, which means that they're going to be about 23% of the population. Now, when you look at the anti-aging there's different gadgets and treatments, from cosmetics to gadgets and supplements that make all sorts of promises, right? It's a big market. Just to give you one specific number, the U.S. anti-aging supplement market in 2024, last year, was valued at $1.4 billion. That's billion with a B, right? And so longevity is really everywhere. There's conferences about longevity. There's biohacking conferences and seminars. There's tons of supplements. If you just type anti-aging supplements on Amazon, you'll get hundreds of different things that make claims and promises and all sorts of things. There's special protocols. There's longevity clinics that make claims of reversing different aging processes, and patients are asking for it, right? So we all want to age gracefully. We all want to be able to continue to function, enjoy our family, our hobbies, our passions, right? And so this is why it's such an important topic. And it's important for us as clinicians to really be able to separate what's truly is supported with evidence, right, from what's more speculated marketing, right? And I'll give you a couple of examples for that. There's hydrogen water or hydrogen tablets, for example, are selling from dozens to hundreds of dollars on Amazon. And there's different claims. There's different claims that it has antioxidant properties to slow aging, boost energy, all the way to protect your DNA, right? Now, the problem is that in reality, there's very limited and inconsistent human data, which means that the benefits are mostly anecdotal, right? There's no real clinical trials that confirm any of those claims. So now that doesn't mean that if there's no evidence, that doesn't mean that it doesn't work, right? But we're always, when we talk about anti-aging processes, right, or protocols, we're always looking at what's supported by evidence and or real physiological understanding, right? Another one is NMN, or nicotinamide mononucleotide. This is sold very often as an anti-aging pill. The claim is that it boosts NAD+, leading to more energy, mitochondrial repair, and longer life. Now, while there are some animal studies that show promising results, those are mostly mice studies. Research in humans is very or extremely limited, right? Mostly focused on the safety or some specific metabolic marker. And again, this is not to say that for the right person, the right patient, with the right timing, the right approach, these couldn't be beneficial as part of a whole protocol. But again, there's what bothers us is that there's a lot of supplements out there that patients spend a lot of money, and there's just no, they're more claims, marketing claims, than actual science. And really the challenge is, when you guide your patients, is really to use evidence, data, and help patients to really achieve the goals that they want. That's what they're coming to see you, right? To find a solution for a certain condition, or to improve a certain aspect of their life or function, right? So today we're going to unpack the latest research in functional and integrated medicine approach. We're going to look at interesting studies of longevity, from nutrition to lifestyle. We're going to discuss really where, how you as a practitioner can utilize some of these approaches, and also, of course, better guide your patients. So, Dr. Esha, I know that it's a big topic, and we always want to start by kind of talking a little bit about why is it important? Like if a nurse practitioner or a physician are watching this right now, watching us, and they're not into longevity, right? They don't focus just on longevity, right? Why is it important for them to understand those concepts?
Well, I mean, it's extremely important, right? Because when patients seek out healthcare practitioners or providers, they're usually seeking us out because they want to stick with us for the duration of their life. They're not usually looking for a one-stop shop, right? And so it's important because we got to understand that longevity helps us anticipate the evolving health needs of the patients as they age. So teenage, 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, all the needs tend to change, right, at different components of our life. And we have to adjust for that with our patients. This allows for proactive interventions that support the quality of life, independence, and just vitality over the decades. We also think about integrating prevention with personalized medicine. So one of the cool things about longevity science or even functional medicine is how we emphasize root cause prevention, not just disease management and palliative care. And practitioners who tend to grasp these principles can design personalized strategies that reduce chronic disease burden and extend the health span. And then lastly, we want to think about just the importance of us as providers providing longevity or applying longevity principles, because pretty much, what we do now shapes the future of healthcare practice. So just having that knowledge of longevity science is going to equip us as practitioners to stay at the forefront of emerging evidence in nutrition, lifestyle integrative therapies. And then this kind of just positions us also as trusted leaders who deliver evidence-based and innovative patient-centered care. And you think about this quote from this writer and activist, Betty Friedan: age is not lost youth, but a new stage of opportunity and strength. So, I think it's really important, Dr. Tal, that we are always ahead of the longevity science and kind of knowing what's out there, what is hype and what is factual, because I'm sure you've seen countless numbers of patients who come in and they're like, well, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? And a lot of what we do is education. A lot of what I'm doing is education. And my biggest thing was that I had to kind of discuss with patients or confront would be like the alkaline water conversation, right? Especially for digestive issues. And you need a certain pH to even activate stomach enzymes. And when you constantly bombarding your belly with alkaline water, it can lead to other digestive pictures. So there's a lot of hype out there in the functional and longevity world.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And I love what you're saying, because one of the reasons that I'm so resonated by this concept of health, right? And utilizing functional and integrative medicine to achieve that is because so many patients come to see us at the stage of sickness, right? And if we just focus on the disease, I mean, yeah, there's pharmaceutical to manage and stabilize them. There is there's pain medication to reduce the pain and suffering. There's all these different supportive and elements that's supposed to manage the condition, right? But in functional medicine, really our approach is quite different, right? It's treating the patient rather than the disease, right? And there's this saying that I always used to explain to patients is that health is not just feeling better, or is not just the absence of a certain diagnosis of disease, right? Health is really the vitality and being able to function without being dependent on a certain pharmaceutical.
I like that, yeah.
Right? So it's really the focus. Our focus is how can we improve? And this is the question when I mentored physicians in my practice or nurses that we used to have in our part of our team, is really to try to look beyond the disease or the label that the patient came with, and try to look at the patient for a second and ask yourself, what are the one or two things that I need to work on with this patient, so 3 months, 6 months from there, they have better function, right? And better health, which is vitality and wellness, right? So that's always like looking beyond and really focusing more on the patient, right? That's what we do a lot in functional medicine.
Completely.
So this kind of leads us to better understand the aging process. And I know we've previously talked about this. We even have a whole class in our functional medicine platform that is just talking about aging process and decline in function. So I wanted to do a quick overview. We got like a 3 or 4 hours class specifically in the advanced modules in functional medicine about this, but I want to kind of to go over a few of those. So let's take a look at some of these concepts from a published study. This is the journal Cells. This illustration was published in 2023. And it shows us the hallmarks of aging and age-related alternation. And you can see here there are multiple factors that are involved. Now, obviously, inflammation is typically going to be at the one of the major players of aging. There's even the term inflammaging, which we have the previous class. We talked more specifically about inflammaging. But you can see we have the telomere attrition. We got the epigenetic factors, right? We have what we mostly look at the most basic level is this patient have inflammatory signs of inflammation? Do they have inflammation, inflammatory markers, right, on their lab tests, like C-reactive protein, right, interleukin-6, right? Do they have signs of inflammation, chronic joint pain, right, autoimmune conditions, right? Even hormonal imbalance in many cases involve inflammation. So we're looking at all these factors. Then we go deeper into better understanding what might be causing it. Is it a dysbiosis of the gut microbiome, right? Is this environmental exposure that the patient, maybe certain lotions they're using, maybe they're working in construction and they're absorbing, breathing all these chemicals, right? Maybe it's something in their home, right? And then we go even deeper into looking at cellular senescence. We had a whole class on cellular senescence, looking at the energy production, right? The mitochondrial, some patients we can see in their labs that they have secondary mitochondrial dysfunction or stem cell exhaustion, right? So ability to, they are losing the ability to recover from injuries, right? And so there's all sorts of there's different levels that we can look at the aging process. And of course, the aging process is really important for all of us because it's not just the age-related diseases, right? When we have accelerated aging, we get our skin looks older, right? So you might be 45, but you look like you're 57, right? Or you have more wrinkles because you're losing your collagen and the supportive tissue, right? It's all the way to how your internal organs function, right? How does your brain function, right? Your memory, your cognition, right? So this is all very important to understand. And of course, there's a lot. We can just have a class on this, like 6 or 7 hours, just a class on these principles. But longevity is really defined as living a long life, right? So typically, if we talk about the lifespan, it's typically 85 to 100 years in a modern context, and there's multiple variations of or determinants, right, that we can talk about. We mentioned the gut, we talked the environment, the lifestyle, right? Our predispositions, it's always there, right? But it's how we treat our body that is going to serve us, right? So so one of my mentors used to always say when it comes to longevity is that, if you take two people, one, you give them this old car, it's like 15, 20 years old car, and they drive it, they drive it appropriately and on the road, and they take care of it, and they invest time and energy and money into doing the treatments appropriately, right? Changing oil and tires and everything. That car is very likely to be able to utilize for maybe 20, 30, even 40 years, right? But if you take another person, if you give them a very expensive, luxurious car, let's say a BMW, Mercedes, or whatever it is, right? And they drive it off-road, they drive it in the forest, in the mountains, and they don't do treatments, right? So they abuse the car and they don't invest time, energy, and money in repairs, in replacing parts or taking care of parts that have been starting to break down, right? Whose car is going to last longer, right? So it's the same concept with our body, right? We have to constantly take care of this vessel. It's the only place we have to live, right? It's this vessel that we are born with, and it has self-healing properties, which is amazing, right? Given to us by a higher power. And we just need to learn how to better take care of it so it can serve us for years to come, right? And this is really where we, why nutrition and lifestyle are one of the most fundamentals. So, Dr. Esha, how would you define, or when it comes to as nutrition as a foundation, right? What are some of the important principles that we might start with?
Yeah. So when it comes to nutrition and our diet and what we're eating for longevity, when patients ask, and they always do, what can I eat to live longer? Is it this diet? Is it that diet? And there's always like the trendy diets on social media. It's easy to get caught up in, the protein craze, which we'll talk about. But the gold standard over and over appears to be the Mediterranean diet. I'm sure you guys have heard us talk about that before, but there's just a ton of research supporting it. And the Mediterranean diet, which I'm sure most of you know, but just to recap, it's comprised largely of fruits, vegetables, olive oil, whole grains, and it's relatively low in added sugars, which is something that's not often mentioned, but it's actually a low and added sugar. So it's anti-inflammatory, it's antioxidative, largely due to its like rich content of phytochemicals, unsaturated fats, so olive oil, and then plant-based foods. So let's take a look at this image from the 2025 journal Obesities, revealing the benefits of the Mediterranean diet. So we see here at the very top, you'll see kind of just an outline of what the Mediterranean diet comprises: vegetables, whole grains, olive oil, fish, herbs, spices. And then the nutritional effects, so what we mentioned, the phytochemicals, polyphenols, antioxidants, healthy fats, saturated fats, fiber, which is amazing. And then kind of the physiological impacts of these nutritional compounds, right? So we have hormone regulation, we have fat metabolism, oxidative stress, appetite regulation. It's really fabulous when you look at how well this diet has been studied and its implications on health. The components of the Mediterranean diet are going to help with reducing oxidative stress, as you see in the hormone regulation, in the image where under hormone regulation, insulin sensitivity, leptin ghrelin balance, cortisol modulation there, fat metabolism, increased beta oxidation of fatty acids, so you're burning more fat, visceral reduction in visceral fat accumulation, that kind of stubborn fat, a lot of times abdominal, increase in your HDLs and impacts to your LDL triglycerides as well. And then you see the oxidative stress picture, antioxidant defenses, and then appetite regulation, so increases in your gut hormones like your GLP-1. We did a podcast on kind of natural tools to support that as well. So Mediterranean diet has been shown to support that picture. All of these components are going to help reduce oxidative stress, modulate inflammation, and positively influence cellular aging processes. Activation of the stress pathways that regulate our lifespan are also impacted by the Mediterranean diet. Meta-analyses also report, which I thought was really cool when I was looking this up, that higher adherence to the Mediterranean diet is associated with longer telomere length. So the telomeres are a biomarker for cellular aging. Usually when they're longer, it represents kind of improved cellular aging or anti-aging. And then when they're shortened, it kind of usually refers to therapeutics or agents that are pretty destructive for aging processes. So things like oxidative stress, cellular smoking, and excessive alcohol intake, things like that can also negatively impact telomere length. So large cohort studies and meta-analyses show a strong association between higher Mediterranean diet adherence and reduced all-cause mortality, as well as lower incidence of cardiovascular disease and cancer. It also supports and optimizes the gut microbiome, which we've talked about that in the past, and how the gut microbiome influences basically every other organ system. So that is the gold standard, is Mediterranean diet. So when patients are asking like, what diet, should I follow? That is one that kind of can come to mind easy with no critical thought involved, and kind of guidance around how to implement that in their lifestyle may be kind of a bigger conversation, but Mediterranean diet is kind of the gold standard. And then I want to talk about protein, because everybody's like so crazy about protein now. It's like everywhere. I think I was on, I don't know what app I was on, and it was like protein popcorn. I thought, what? This is so odd. And so protein's everywhere. You can't escape it. It's in bars, it's in cookies, it's in chips. They're even protein chips now. Popcorn, like I mentioned, there's protein cakes. It's all over the place. And so patients are also obsessed with protein, but they're kind of confused. Like, do I need all of this protein? I heard I should be getting a gram per pound of body weight. Do I need that? And so the reality is that too little protein contributes to issues as we age, and in the longevity picture, something called sarcopenia and also frailty. So sarcopenia is issues with muscle volume. And then, too much protein can actually chronically activate the mTOR pathway, which is associated when it's activated with kind of accelerated aging. The key is somewhere in the middle, right? So it's balance. You want enough protein to maintain muscle function and muscle volume, but not so much that basically are working against yourself or the patient's working against their longevity. So like I said, it's really about balance. You do want enough, but not too much to overstimulate those growth pathways that could work against longevity. So mTOR is abbreviation for the mechanistic target of rapamycin. It's a pathway that's essential in regulating cell growth, metabolism, and protein synthesis. Protein ingestion, especially protein that's like rich in amino acid leucine, which I didn't really know that, but that's something that I learned today. Kind of protein rich in leucine and just protein in general will activate the mTOR signaling in a dose-dependent manner. So dose-dependent, and this is in skeletal muscle and immune cells. So maximal mTOR activation and muscle protein synthesis occur with moderate protein doses, so typically 20 to 30 grams per meal in humans, while higher intakes do not further increase the synthesis, but may have adverse effects. So high protein diets, when you look at some of the studies, especially those exceeding about 22% of energy intake or over 25 grams per meal, can excessively activate mTOR in macrophages specifically, suppressing autophagy and promoting atherosclerosis in animal models and human cells. So chronic overactivation of mTOR by excess amino acids may impair insulin signaling and contribute to insulin resistance and an increased risk of type 2 diabetes. And it's really interesting because I was a part of this program a long time ago, and we were basically helping patients with optimizing their anti-aging responses. So it was like maybe a few months long, the program was, and they were doing different kind of intermittent fasting techniques, which has a ton of great science behind it. And then we were also educating them on diet. And, this came up a lot around like how much protein, because when you do a lot of intermittent fasting protocols, sometimes the protein intake is usually reduced because you just don't have enough time to get all this protein in. And it was just a really great conversation with those patients around just kind of the need of having balance, because too much of anything is not good. I mean, the saying is true, but protein especially, you would think nowadays you could just eat all the protein you want and you're going to have, the best metabolic health, but that's not always the case. So I hope that was useful for you guys, and it gives you some insight into guiding your patients for protein intake. I mean, for me, I don't know about you, Dr. Tall, but for me, when I'm talking to patients about protein, there are a couple like rules of thumb, and depending on where their age is and what I'll recommend for them, I do typically tell folks that at the very least, your baseline should be around like 60 or so grams a day. And if you, depending on what's happening with your health and disease states, I'll go up from there. But what do you think?
Yeah, I think I like the concept of high protein, right? Unless they have a kidney problem or something like that. But I like the concept of high protein because when we look at the surveys overall, as the elderly population typically consumes less protein than they should. Now, there's also some interesting report. There's one meta-analysis that I read that mentioned that the benefits of higher protein diet is much more noticeable and in individuals that actually had some training, right? So that involved exercise, like strength training, because then the stimuli is there, right, to maintain the muscle. Now, obviously, if we don't consume enough protein for our body needs in general, then we're in a state of catabolism, right? So
Right.
we're starting to break down more than we actually maintain our muscles.
Exactly.
But the real benefit for older individuals with high protein is if they have some sort of stimuli. Now, doesn't mean that they necessarily have to go to the gym and start doing 2 hours of weightlifting, right? Even just going up the stairs, right, every day instead of using the elevator. Even just carrying weight, right? So like carrying bags, right, instead of just putting them in a car. There's one of my colleagues, another doctor that I just talked to, send me this new trend, which is really cool. It's body weights, so it's almost like a vest, and you can put in like weight.
Yeah.
And yeah, you probably
I've seen that. I have
Yeah.
a weighted vest. Yeah, and I'll just put it on sometimes and like do stuff around the house. And yeah, I love that.
Yeah. So like you said, it's adding some extra challenge for our musculoskeletal system, right? And I've seen, some people apparently, I've seen pictures of people hiking with those as well. So you can utilize it for any way you want, but it's based on the concept that us humans, we used to carry things, right? Carry babies, carry children, carry grocery, carry food, carry whatever it is. And that was one of our major exercises, right? And so it's kind of like going back to that.
Yeah, no, totally. I think that's excellent. And I will say, even though we just talked about protein is absolutely necessary for health and longevity. And most of the patients that I've seen don't eat enough nutrition and don't get enough protein in, right? So, and maybe you guys will find that too with a lot of your chronic scenario patients in longevity. They're probably not getting enough nutrition, but there is a balance to it as well. So we'll pop into a pop quiz for you all. So pop quiz. So chronic overactivation of the mTOR by excess amino acids or protein may contribute to which of the following outcomes? We just finished on that one. So I'll give you a couple seconds. All right. So the answer here is going to be B. All right, so chronic overactivation of this mTOR pathway may contribute to impaired insulin signaling and higher risk of type 2 diabetes. And so again, the goal is not to kind of scare you all away from like protein, but I will say, like Dr. Tall mentioned, there definitely is a balance, and I tend to support kind of higher protein intake because most of the people that I see, or when I go through their diet, they're probably getting 20 grams of protein a day, which is just not enough to sustain an optimal internal environment. So if you're interested in learning more about the functional approach to longevity, along with functional integrative ways to support your patient's metabolic health and just longevity practices, of course, you have your modules, log into the Advanced Clinical Functional Medicine platform. You can also book a coaching call with us. Those are complimentary. We can help you review your case studies, and it's a part of your program. It does not cost any extra. So yeah, Dr. Tall, what do you think about kind of the next strategy for longevity?
Yeah, I mean, first, I think, it's so important that you talked about nutrition. And I know that most medical professionals don't get enough of training in nutrition, and it is the foundation of good health. Obviously, you don't have to become a nutritionist. You can learn clinical nutrition. We have it as part of the functional medicine approach in the program, but just giving your patient like one small recommendation, right? Every time they come in is already going to take them in the right direction. It might not transform their health within a week or two,
right,
but slowly every time, every meet point, you check in with them, and every session, and then you slowly kind of redirect them towards better health. And the reason why it's so important, and it should come from practitioners, is because there's so much, I'm tempted, I don't want to use the word junk out there, but there's so much misinformation out there.
I agree.
And one of these incidents that I encountered, one of those was a patient. I'll never forget it. She was a really nice person. She was she was kind of in her early 60s, and she was still working and she was enjoying her work, and she developed diabetes and started losing her eyesight. Cognitive function was starting to kind of decline, fatigue, and kind of like really symptoms when you look at it overall. Yeah, it's symptoms of type 2 diabetes or complications, but it's also accelerated aging, right? The loss of function. And she came to see us. We immediately saw that hemoglobin A1C was way higher than what we wanted it to be. We sat with her, we explained to her, and for about 4 months we worked with her. So it was like targeted supplements, looking at the root causes, and then using some lifestyle dietary changes, right? So 4 months later, she came in. Hemoglobin A1C is now within normal range.
Nice.
We were very excited about it. And then she started feeling better, like less GI disorder, less GI side effects, less of this, a little bit more energy, right? Things starting to turn. So fast forward, that was like 4 months into it. Fast forward, I was like, okay, now we don't need to see you every 2 weeks. We can see you every month or month and a half, depending on your budget and what we find to be working best for us or for you. And she said, great. She came back a month. It was like maybe 5 weeks into it. And she said, I don't know what's happening. I'm just not feeling well, right? So we pulled up this glucose meter and we tested in the office, and it was really high. And I was like, okay, so tell me what's going on. What did you change? What happened? And she said, oh, I went on this diet, and and I was like, okay, well, tell me more about this diet. And she's like, oh, it's a really good diet. I went to a seminar about it, and then I read it, and then they enrolled me into this program with this diet. And it's like I'm supposed to lose weight, and it's supposed to be great. And I don't know if it's that, but I'm just not feeling good. And I was like, how long have you been in it? She's like, well, about 3 weeks now. I was like, okay, tell me what's the name of the diet and what you're eating. And she's like, well, it's mostly potatoes. Dr. Esha, do you want to guess what the name of the diet? I know there's like a million diets.
Yeah, it's like is it the Pringles diet?
It's actually interesting because I thought it was one of those, kind of made up. I mean, all diets are made up, right? But it's like one of those made up, like Pringles diet, right?
Yeah.
And what I found, the reason why she was so hooked on it, it was because it was promoted by a medical doctors. And the name of the diet is the McDougall diet. And it's really interesting. I've never heard about it before. But now I'm not saying it, I'm not saying it's a bad diet. I'm just saying what I've read about this diet and this experience with this patient who everything turned to worse, right? And apparently the McDougall diet, from what at least I was reading, it was promoted in the 70s, invented in the 70s by a doctor called Dr. Greg McDougall, which said, we got to eat more plant-centered, like more, whole grain, stuff like that. Now, in order to market the diet, he marketed it as the potato, the starch diet. And essentially potato, and now his son took over it, his son, John McDougall, and they now heavily promote it, right? As this as this like amazing diet. And they mostly eat, at least from what this patient was telling me, it's mostly potatoes. And you can imagine what just eating mostly potatoes will do to a type 2 diabetes patient, right? I mean, you don't need a degree in nutrition for all of us to understand that when you eat starchy vegetables, it spikes up your glucose levels, right? So it's high glycemic, right? It's high insulin. It also causes, there's glycation and vascular inflammation associated with it, and neuropathy progression, right? It's the worst thing you want to do with a type 2 diabetes, right? So this is just an example of, like, if you're not, as the healthcare practitioner and the health expert, if you're not going to be the one learning clinical nutrition, learning how to explain and navigate your patients, right? They're going to go out there and they're going to look and find the weirdest things.
They will. There's a Pringles diet that I learned about in school. Pringles used to have like a reduced fat or like a light fat version, and it contained this like synthetic fat. So it wasn't absorbed. So people would just be able to eat like Pringles and not gain any, not absorb the fat. And so they got to enjoy their chips and they would lose weight because it was like you eat 7 chips a day, some kind of weird math to it. But people were losing weight eating Pringles. And this is like old school. But I think the fat has been since banned. But I thought that's what you were referring to. But there's a different potato chip diet, I guess.
Yes, I didn't know that. Well, now there's variation to the McDougall diet, so now they can pick between the both, and they don't have to just get stuck with one imbalanced diet, right? There's two, so that's good. So we talked a little bit about physical activity and how there's really 2 benefits. There's like we got the aerobics and resistance, right? Those are kind of like the two that we talk the most about. So when we talk about physical activity in the aspects of more focused on longevity, right? So some really cool studies that I wanted to share, and there's I'm going to show you a picture. It's really cool picture from the journal Geroscience. And this was published in 2023. So let's take a look at this picture. And of course, we try to pick, a picture is worth 1,000 words, right? So we always try to pick illustrations. As we go into complex topics, we always try to pick illustrations from studies that are simple to understand. And you can see here really the concepts that they're talking about is from mitochondrial functions, increase in sirtuins. We're not going to get into sirtuins and cellular senescence right now. We have a whole chapter and a whole module in our advanced functional medicine training on it. But you can see here that really one of the major factors is stress resilient, endocrine effect. You got reduction in oxidative stress. You got reduction in chronic inflammation, right? It also impacts your regulation of your genes, essentially. So even if you have the genes of disease, right, as your predisposition, as a gift you got from your parents or grandparents, by choosing to have the right type of exercise, you can better regulate those and reduce the risk maybe of those genes of disease turning on, right, which could change the course of your life forever. And so one of the cool things we're talking about in research is a protein that is called brain-derived neurotrophic factor. Now, in the anti-aging modules, we talk more specifically about supplements and evidence on how certain nutraceuticals can elevate this compound. But this protein is essentially a very important compound for maintaining neuronal integrity. There's some really cool studies showing that it promotes neuroplasticity, and it supports the repair of motor neurons. So in practical terms, if you have a higher secretion of this brain-derived neurotrophic factor or activity, it helps to preserve cognitive performance and resilience against degenerative processes, right? Especially as we age. And this is something that Dr. Daniel Amen, the psychiatrist who's been studying brains for years, or sometimes talk about the brain-derived neurotrophic factor. We just talk more about the mechanisms in the class and then talk more about the practical, what to actually do with patients. So really interesting that regular physical activity, especially aerobic exercises, was found to running, cycling, fast walking, hiking, right, swimming was consistently found to increase levels of brain-derived neurotrophic factors in both animal and human studies. So in order to do that most effectively, you want to strive for at least 20 to 40 minutes at about 70% of your max heart rate. Now you can go up and down. You can have like a 5 minutes If you're walking on the treadmill, you can have like a 5 minutes elevated when it increases your heart rate, and then go back down, right? So you don't have to stay there at like the entire time. You can do that back and forth, right? To go back down to your more convenient or comfortable pace, right? But that's one thing. So aerobic exercise is really important for that. Now, regular physical activity, especially aerobic exercise we're talking before, is also associated with a longer leukocytes telomere length. And telomere length is like a measure of your biological age in research. And of course, important for cardiometabolic health, right? Now, there are other benefits to combining strength training, right? So strength training is really important for muscle mass, which helps with your basal metabolic rate and of course, the amount of calories that you burn and healthy weight. Also important for your muscular frame, right? So that's really important for maintaining bone mass and all of that. Now, let's talk about another interesting study. So this was published from the British Journal of Sports Medicine, 2019. And they essentially looked at about 75 to 150 minutes of vigorous aerobic activity per week, or 150 to 300 minutes of moderate activity, right? So they compared. They said, okay, if we're doing 3 or 4 hours of like moderate activity versus shorter amount, about half of that, but more vigorous activity, right? And they kind of looked at what's the substantial longevity benefits, right? And they found that there is a maximal reduction in mortality risk of about 3 to 5 times, right? With those who have been exercising in both groups, which is really great. Now, meeting physical activity guidelines to really reduce all-cause mortality by up to 40% was estimated to be about 750 minutes per week, right? So that's high. That's definitely high. But what I typically recommend patients to build up to that is just start with a 15 minutes walk after lunch, right? And then bump it up to 30 minutes. Right. And then add maybe a group exercise that you like once or twice a week. Right. Maybe, people still do Zumba classes and dance class. And there's all sorts of different classes that can help you to have a more vigorous aerobic activity, right, than just walking. So that could be cycling class. That could be Zumba class. That could be dancing class. So it has that social impact as well. Or if you like swimming or hiking, that's a good one as well. So with that being said, let's bring up our pop quiz. And so the question is, what are the primary roles of BDNF in the nervous system? So as we mentioned, this is the brain-derived nootropic factor. So possible answer number 1 is maintaining neural integrity and promoting neuroplasticity. Possible answer the second one, supporting repair of motor neurons. Option C is preserving cognitive performance and resilience against neurodegeneration. And option D is all of the above. Which one do you think it is? Now, if you said D, then you are absolutely right. The BDNF is essentially important for all of those. This is the protein that we want to stimulate. We want to stimulate the synthesis of and production of. And as I mentioned, there are, with aerobic exercise, that are moderate to vigorous, right, to going up to 70% of your capacity, you can actually stimulate more of the secretion of that. And if you want to learn more about the anti-aging specific proteins and how to stimulate or support the increase of those, log into your anti-aging module in the Advanced Functional Medicine program, where you can learn from experts how to better take care of yourself, better take care of your patients as well. So, Dr. Esha, this leads us to testing, right? It's almost important. We all love data. So
Yes.
Yes. So what are some of the biomarkers we want to look into?
Totally. So when we talk about longevity and healthy aging, we have to think about how to objectively measure these things for our patients. And these tools that we have are more than numbers. They give us a real window into the metabolic function, nutrient status, hormone balance, and all the things related to longevity. So we definitely want to think about how do we test and assess our patients' longevity picture in their metabolic scenario. So we're going to take a look at this image from the 2022 journal Frontiers in Aging, and it just looks at different biomarkers for aging. Some of the ones I'm going to talk about, you'll see listed here. Some of the ones in this picture are not really listed. At the very left, you'll see kind of that insulin scenario. So let's start with that one. So starting with metabolic health, key labs are going to include fasting insulin, the HOMA-IR, homeostasis model assessment of insulin resistance, HOMA-IR, hemoglobin A1C, and lipid particle size. These are measurements that are going to tell us a lot more than just traditional metabolic panels. For example, the lipid particle size can reveal the cardiovascular risk in ways that total cholesterol can't. So smaller LDL particles are more likely to contribute to atherosclerosis, which we know puts us in the category of cardiovascular, or patients in the category of cardiovascular disease risk. And then, fasting insulin and HOMA-IR help us identify insulin resistance early, often before someone develops full-blown diabetes, allowing for very proactive management. I think this is one of the most important things we could be looking at in our patients is their blood sugar insulin picture. In one observational study, it was found that a fasting insulin greater than like a 9 correctly identified 80% of prediabetes cases. And in this study, predominantly the cohort consisted of, I think they were considered categorically obese females. But in my practice, I like to see if we can get it there, fasting insulin at a 5, which may seem strict, but even when you look at the fasting insulin levels around 10, you see some of the literature discussing kind of insulin resistance risks and prediabetes risks, things of that nature. So the literature, I think, says anywhere between 2 or 1 to 20 or maybe 15 is considered normal, but I like to see the window really tightly regulated. So that's just my little clinical pearl. I think if you can if somebody has metabolic issues or longevity pictures they're trying to solve, just the more you're able to get that down, the better. But I think the optimal picture is around a 5. Also, increased HOMA-IR also can predict prediabetes. So these are just some tests you can have measured in your patients. We think about inflammation outside of the metabolic picture. Oxidative stress and inflammation are another critical piece. So labs like your high sensitivity CRP, your homocysteine, your oxidized LDL, these can provide insight into inflammatory processes, which are connected, but separate from the blood sugar metabolic picture in a way. These drive many age-related diseases. If you look at kind of the number one cause of death in America, except for the year, I think 1918, where the flu killed more people. Maybe it was I think it was 1918. But if you look at this, cardiovascular disease has been number one cause of death forever in America. So oxidized LDL can damage blood vessels, while elevated homocysteine is linked to both cardiovascular and cognitive decline. And so average LDL-C values in adults are around 100 to 120. It's really interesting when you look at some of the literature. Evidence suggests that a physiologically normal and optimal range is around 50 to 70, which seems really low, but it's associated with minimal atherosclerosis. To note, some of the studies show that if your levels get too low, it can actually be negative. You need fats in the body, but if it gets too low for certain populations, it can actually do damage in the system. But I just wanted to present that piece of it, that clinical pearl, in terms of other ranges that we don't commonly discuss that are also associated with minimal atherosclerosis. But lowering LDL-C to the range is generally safe and beneficial. And like I said, some studies, older adults with chronic illness suggest caution with kind of very low levels. And then outside of that picture, we think about nutrients, right? So we talked about metabolic, blood sugar, we talked about inflammatory markers. Nutrient markers are also very important. So this is your vitamin D, your vitamin B12, your folate, your magnesium, your omega-3 index, all really important. When you look at just vitamin D, low levels of vitamin D in older adults are associated with increased risk of osteoporosis, fracture, sarcopenia, cardiovascular diseases, diabetes, cognitive decline, and mortality. So definitely you want to kind of look at nutrient markers on your patients just as a starting point. And then the last big piece of the puzzle, we'd say, would be like hormone pictures. So hormones kind of round out this picture. So different labs, your DHEAS, your cortisol rhythm, your sex hormones, a full panel of that can give us insight into metabolism, muscle, bone health, hormone health, even cognitive function. Cortisol patterns, for example, can reveal the impact of stress on inflammation and metabolism, while monitoring the sex hormones help to guide interventions that maintain vitality through the aging process. So I know there's a bunch of information there, but again, all of this can be found in their modules in the platform. If you log into your platform, you'll kind of be able to access all of this information as well. And again, the coaching calls are complimentary, so you're more than welcome to book a call if you have a longevity case and you want to kind of learn about labs or just go over labs and interpret some of those. So that's a little snippet on lab and biomarkers to think about. Now let's jump into a pop quiz. Elevated homocysteine levels are linked to which of the following? Only cardiovascular disease, only cognitive decline, both cardiovascular disease and cognitive decline, or D, bone density loss. I'll give you a few seconds. The answer is, of course, C. So both cardiovascular disease and cognitive decline. So again, if you're interested in learning more, log into your advanced clinical functional medicine platform, and you can also book a coaching call with us. But Dr. Todd, what do you think about those labs? Sounds good?
So those are so important. And of course, we love talking about the data and love talking about labs. So we'll go from the essentials all the way to the specialty, right? So depending on what you would like to test. So if it's hormones, we can go deeper into using UMAP, go even beyond Dodge test, and then we have the mitochondria, and we got the gut, and we got all sorts of tests that we can go down and really look at what's going on there, right? Yep. So these are all important. And we could also use biomarkers that are used in studies, such as telomere length. There's actually specialty lab tests that are available to see your biological age and compare it to your chronologic age and see, how am I doing? Am I doing worse? As my cell have signs of accelerated aging or not? So we got lots of ways, and we talk about all of those in the advanced program. So thank you for sharing those biomarkers.
Yeah.
And of course, we're going to transition from here to a really cool topic. We've started adding more and more as the evidence is starting to come out. We started talking more and more about peptide therapy. And peptide therapy has been around for several years, but the evidence is, in so many cases, are still behind. So as evidence, more and more published studies are coming out, we're starting to talk more about it, talk more about some possible clinical application to help our patients. And of course, kind of going beyond the, talking about more of the natural approaches to encourage and support healthy function. So this leads us, so we're going to focus today on one of those strategies. As I mentioned, if you want to learn more of those strategies, you can log into the anti-aging module, and then there's like all sorts of protocol by anti-aging expert physician that will be teaching you about those. But the one compound that I want to mention is, so we're going to dive into peptide therapy for cognitive function. This is one of the important factors, obviously, of maintaining healthy aging. And so that would be L-carnosine. Now, L-carnosine is a naturally occurring dipeptide, and it's essentially composed of beta-alanine and histidine. And there is emerging evidence that supports its role as neuroprotective agent. And so we're going to take a look at an image from a published study 2019 in the journal Nutrients. And it's hard to read, but there's a few really important factors that they talk about. So essentially, L-carnosine has neuroprotective mechanisms. And so it has antioxidative action, right? Indirectly through modulating the endogenous antioxidant system, and also directly by decreasing the intracellular levels of reactive species, right? Or let's simplify it and call it free radicals in your cells, right? It also have anti-glycation activity, which reduces the formation of advanced glycation end products, which we know that they play a role in cellular aging, some neurodegenerative conditions as well. And L-carnosine supports mitochondrial function and promotes neuronal energy production, which is very, very important for brain function, right? And so by doing all of those, essentially, among others, it reduces neurotoxicity, it supports healthy energy production. So those are really, really important factors. So there's research that suggests that supplementation with L-carnosine may improve memory, attention, and overall cognitive resilience, particularly with aging population. So most human studies are still small and emerging, but there's a lot of data from both animal and preliminary human research that is showing a stronger association between L-carnosine use and cognitive support. So there was one of those, if you're looking at dosages and looking further into this compound, there was one systemic review and meta-analysis that looked at the effect of carnosine and anserine supplementation on cognitive function in older adults. And they essentially used 1 gram per day for 12 weeks. And they reported that it was associated with improvement in overall cognitive performance. Now, there was no impact on mood. For example, there's no significant impact on individuals with depression symptoms, but it's showing us that this could be used as a part of a protocol, right? So if a patient comes to see you with cognitive decline, for example, always look at the root causes of neuronal damage, oxidative stress, inflammation. That's what we do, the root cause with functional medicine, right? And that will give them the biggest transformation and the biggest benefit long term. But we can also put together a treatment protocol that supports that, right? Including lifestyle modification. We already talked about exercise. Dr. Esha talks about nutrition as the foundation, and utilizing supplements such as L-carnosine. By the way, you can see on the picture, this is a professional grade company you can look into. Again, we're not affiliated with any supplement company, so we're not selling supplements here. Our role is to look at the evidence and inform you so you can make an evidence-based, educate your patients. So we got a couple of really good questions here that I wanted to address. One of them is the intermittent fasting and longevity, and the second one is alkaline water. And then the third is cortisol in a Western medicine. How do we measure? Should we address that? Should we measure cortisol in a clinic? And since we are at the end of today's class, we're going to briefly answer them and mention that, of course, these are big topics. So I'll start with talking a little bit about intermittent fasting, and then Dr. Esha, I know you were talking about the alkaline water. Yeah. So intermittent fasting, essentially there's all different types of intermittent fasting. There's not eating for 12 hours. There's not eating for like 20 hours. There's all sorts of intermittent fasting. In general, intermittent fasting reliably improves some health span markers: weight, insulin sensitivity, blood pressure. There's some benefits to that. There's some studies that show benefits to that. Obviously, if it's too restrictive, it's going to be harder for the patient to maintain that long term. And of course, one of the downside to not doing it properly is you risking, especially with older patients, you're risking pushing them towards nutritional insufficiency, which is not a good thing. So if you're interested in intermittent fasting, Dr. Chill has a really good class on the clinical application of diets, and he talks about exactly how to do it properly and what is the research showing us exactly on how to do it to get the benefits, but not. And there's also supplements you can integrate to facilitate further that cellular those cellular benefits. Dr. Esha, I'll let you answer about alkaline water.
Yeah. So when you look at the digestive system, your stomach is very acidic. The pH of the stomach needs to be acidic because you need to basically, break down your food. So when I'm not sure if alkaline water is still a big thing. I hadn't really checked that lately on social media, but a couple years ago, it was really, really big, and people had alkaline water machines. They were just drinking all the alkaline water they could find. And, some alkaline water pH is around 9, or even I've seen some kind of getting it to like 10 or 11. And your stomach pH is like no more than a 4. Sometimes it can be a 5 when you're eating. But I would definitely say that when you think about outside of just your stomach acid and needing that acidity to break down your food, certain enzymes or certain factors that activate enzymes, your pepsin, pepsinogen, those things, which are stomach enzymes, they need a certain level of pH to even activate, right? So if somebody's continuously drinking a ton of like alkaline components on the belly, there's a potential for disturbing that balance. And I just find that a lot of people that I've seen that drink a lot of alkaline water, that's the only kind of water they drink, tend to have more GI issues. So I just am not a big fan of it. I just kind of recommend water with the typical like spring water pH around 7 or so. So that's kind of my thing about alkaline water. I don't really think it's the best thing for the digestive tract when you look at just pHs and things of that nature. So that's my spiel on alkaline water.
Great. Thank you for letting us know. And there is with reducing the pH in the GI system, obviously there's for patients with functional dyspepsia, that might be something that we can look into. And there's actually one particular study that was published on it that found that it was like electrolyzed alkaline reduced water. I think it was pH 9.5.
Okay.
And they did that for 6 weeks. So that was found to be helpful. So, in some, it's with the right person and the right approach, some things could be beneficial. But in general, right, drinking alkaline water is not going to change the pH of our internal environment, right? It doesn't change the blood pH, for example. Right. And that's because it is tightly regulated. It's something that is really important to be tightly regulated. So does it have a systemic impact? It's more reasonable to understand, based on understanding. It's more likely that it actually doesn't. Right?
Yeah, it's not something I'd recommend just doing for the sake of a longevity protocol, right? So more so what you mentioned, if there is specific scenarios where you do want to impact the pH, yeah, it might be useful, but it's not something that's just a part. It kind of goes into the bag of what you mentioned, just all the things people are trying for the sake of trying them. But yeah.
Yes, absolutely. So the last question for today, and you guys have really great questions. I'm so glad that you're asking those questions, because if you ask those questions, there's probably other practitioners here on this class. And typically we get 150 to 200 practitioners on this class every Wednesday evening. So there's probably others that are asking themselves the same thing. You were just first to put it in. So that's really good questions. The next question is about should we measure cortisol in a Western medicine clinic, because that's all that is done is a AM cortisol via blood, right? And so do you want to
Yeah, I mean, I do think that I think it can be useful. I know that when I've seen patients when we're looking at morning cortisol or their doctors run it, you typically expect to see like at least double digits, right, in the morning. So they get it done first thing in the morning. You want it to be relatively high, but if they get it done in the morning and the levels are low, that could signal, hey, what's happening, right? Because cortisol is needed to get you out of bed and get you going in the morning. So I think there is value to it in the functional medicine world. What do you think?
So I think that the only reason I would ever recommend a patient to get their cortisol done in the morning is if their insurance covers it.
Yeah.
Because if it doesn't cost them anything, go for it. Is it useful to understand the HPA axis function or their response for stress response, or their adrenal function? Not so much.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Right? Because while it's beneficial, and by the way, the test, essentially, when we do it like a blood test for AM cortisol, it's mostly done in standard of care to screen out for diseases such as Cushing's syndrome, right? It's not really designed to be functionally looked at, because when you look at the function of this whole system, the HPA axis or adrenal or stress response, you really have to look at it at least 4 or 5 times a day, because it fluctuates, right? So that would typically be our recommendation. Now, if your patient comes in and say, oh, they got normal cortisol levels in the morning, does it mean that that system is working properly? I mean, I'm sure you've seen it. We've done so many of those tests, right? The saliva test 4 or 5 or 6 times a day, and we've seen so many patients that their cortisol levels or blood cortisol levels are normal in the morning.
Yep.
But it's all sorts of imbalance throughout the day, right? It's like it dips down in the afternoon, it dips down too much in the evening, it goes up in the evening, and now they feel more anxiety or can't sleep, or or blood sugar elevates suddenly. So it's, get what you can from the insurance, because it's always useful. But if you want to look at the whole picture, you want to really look at the system, how it works. Functionally, you really have to do it. You have to follow the circadian rhythm.
Yeah. Yeah, right? I agree. I don't really actually order it. If they come in with it, I'll, talk about it. But it's really, most of the time it's normal, right? But then you do the salivary cortisol, or you get 4 different measurements throughout the day, and it's all over the place, right? So yeah. Yeah, exactly.
It's better to do it. Also, remember that if your patient has to get dressed, get into the car, drive through traffic, go into the lab, draw their blood, there's all sorts of, we're talking about 2 or 3 stressors right there, right? So are we getting the right reading, right, for the cortisol, right? So it's hard to say. It's really hard to say. It's the functional test is really to measure it when they first wake up into the saliva, and then measure it multiple times during the day. That gives you the whole picture. So hopefully that helps. By the way, it's not a very expensive test. I mean, if the patient, we found that most patients can afford it. You can find it from $120 to $180 or $200, and then it gives you the full picture. And you can find it by doctor's data. There's other labs that obviously you can order it from. So great questions. And this was wonderful. And as usual, we can help you if you're interested in building a functional medicine practice or bringing it into your practice. We'd love to help you. That's what we're passionate about. We have Dr. Esha as one of our medical coaches, where she can show you how to use the clinical tools, the evaluation tools, and do one-on-one. Dr. Chill, Dr. Kim, they're all experts in these topics. And of course, join the functional medicine program. Joining the functional medicine program gives you access to everything. That includes the functional medicine treatment protocol app, and all the clinical guides, all the live workshops, and everything else. So we can help you And one of the things that I wanted to mention is that we just celebrated one of the community members, Suzanne. She's a nurse practitioner. As she's going through the program, she started applying everything. She transitioned out and opened her own practice, consultation
Amazing.
practice virtually. And Suzanne has been doing a lot of coaching with us and Dr. Chael. And she is now built a consistent source of revenue. So she's got membership and she's onboarding patients to membership. And she got to the point now, a few months into the program, where she's got full-time patients, and now we kind of guide her towards hiring her first practitioner.
Oh, that's amazing. Congratulations,
Suzanne. Yes. So that's amazing. And we're going to release the testimonial and the interview I had with Suzanne this weekend. And she shared with you how she actually built this $313 a month membership style practice. So you can feel free to check it out. Reach out to us if you have any questions. And this month's promotion, we got all of these included for you: the phone app, the coaching, the mentorship, one-on-one practice building classes if you want to build a successful practice, and everything is self-paced, 100% online, includes all the treatment protocols and all the classes. So thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much, Dr. Esha, for taking the time to share your experience. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.
And I also want to thank our media team and Jacob for being here, making it possible for us to connect with you and share this amazing information. And thank all of you for being here and advancing your skills, advancing your knowledge, investing time and effort to bring better care for your patients and your community. I really appreciate you being the guiding light for your patients. So thank you. Take care of yourself in the meantime, and we'll see you in the next class.
Bye, everyone.